Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you like this episode, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment or two, then subscribe and click on the bell to receive notifications of whenever we release new videos. Also, please remember to share them to your social media. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the Gravelly Range in the Beaverhead Deer Lodge National Forest in southwest Montana. The Gravellys, as locals refer to them, are a remote and isolated geographic area with very little road access. It is the largest expanse of natural prairie in Montana that is undisturbed. The elevation here varies from 7,400 to 9,500 feet and showcases subalpine grasslands and conifer forests rolling like great waves of green. Many people make the trip to this area to hike and view the numerous wildflowers that bloom from June through July each year. Over 250 species of plants call this area home, along with elk, deer, moose, and pronghorn antelope. The predators in the Gravellys include coyotes, wolves, cougars, bobcats, and black bears, as well as a growing population of grizzly bears. In late fall, food sources for grizzly bears begin to decrease in quality and amount. They have spent the spring and summer browsing succulent greens and devouring delicious berries, amassing needed fat for hibernation, and all that effort culminates in a peaceful retreat into a den for the winter. When the grogginess of torpor begins to set in, grizzlies will begin to search for an ideal place to excavate themselves a den on the upper one-third of 30 to 60-degree slopes on the north face of mountains. Researchers indicate that they prefer to make their dens at elevations between 6,000 and 10,000 feet, but the reasons are not clearly explained. After 3 to 7 days of digging, their den will be finished. The bears will spend up to 6 months in a state of torpor, in which their bodily functions slow down while they rest. They can wake up easily if they do not manage to store enough body fat. On Saturday, October 21st, 2023, a hunter, whom we will call Tom, was hiking the meadow edges and glassing for game. There are several game animals in season at this time of year in Montana, and Tom could take any animal for which he had a tag. The sign of animals in the area is a constant sight here because there are so many. You can hardly walk 30 yards before coming across a deer track or an elk track. Grizzly tracks, on the other hand, are fewer and far between, and a definite precursor that should keep your head on a swivel for their presence. Unbeknownst to Tom, one of the area's giant sow grizzlies was just around the bend from his location. She had spent the summer eating as much food as she could in the valleys and had made her way up to the high country to find a good place to hibernate. The northern slope of the mountain she picked was a prime location with soil that allowed her to dig a nice deep den. Because it was the northern exposure of the mountain, it was thick with trees and bushes which would act as insulation while she waited the winter out. She used her massive paws, tipped with long, sharp claws, to pull the human equivalent of a shovel of dirt out of her denning spot with each rake of her paws. This bear had had a great year in terms of food and was in prime condition. She was what humans would consider a good bear, in that she had never had any conflicts with people or their dwellings, sticking to herself and leaving the people and their animals alone. As Tom hiked through the trees, scanning for movement, the bear continued to dig her den. The most dangerous part about a bear digging a den is that once the den gets deep enough for them to crawl halfway into, they are nearly invisible to anyone passing by. With their heads buried deep in their den, they can't hear, see, or smell anyone approaching them in time to give themselves a chance to escape. This combination of time of year, denning needs, and human recreation was just about to culminate in a horrible and terrifying event that both parties would probably rather avoid. Pushing his way through the brush, Tom's path must have taken him right next to the opening of the grizzly's den. By the time he heard her whoof at him, he knew he was way too close for comfort. He glanced up and could see the bear's powerful paws crashing their way through the undergrowth and closing the few yards that separated them. He knew that it would be a horrible gamble to lose betting the bear was bluffing as she charged toward him. He had less than a few seconds to decide what to do and do it, or potentially lose his life. Tom raised his hunting rifle to his shoulder and fired when the bear was scant feet from him. His bullet hit the off switch on the bear's life as she piled up and laid still. The inanimation of death is a sad thing, and to witness it in an animal you didn't intend to kill can be heart-rending. Most hunters have no desire to shoot or injure an animal they do not get to keep and consume, and I think it is safe to say that Tom must have felt the same sentiments. As the surprised bear lay dead, Tom knew he had to get a hold of the Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks authorities so they could understand what had transpired. He quickly made his way back down the mountain to his vehicle, and as soon as he was in range, he contacted them with the details of the incident. The authorities sent a response team to the location at which they could find the bear's body, according to Tom. They traveled to the scene of the incident and examined the grizzly's remains. The forensic evidence told the story very clearly. They could see the bear's tracks at the den site indelibly pressed into the loose soil she had pulled from the inside of it. Following her tracks as she bounded toward Tom confirmed his story of self-defense. They decided his defense of his life was a valid reason for killing the grizzly. They notified him that he would not be cited for any violations in an initial analysis. The United States Fish and Wildlife Agency is still completing its investigation of the attack, and results have yet to be made publicly available. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I am left with a few questions for you. How do you think Tom could have possibly avoided this confrontation with the grizzly? Do you think Tom was making noise, and that brought the sow out of her den? How difficult is it to spot a grizzly who is at least partially concealed in a den she is digging? Do you think bear spray may have prevented this attack and possibly saved the bear's life? How could this encounter have been worse than it was? I will be glad to read and reply to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below and let's talk about it.
Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to Henry's Lake, Idaho, just 20 miles from the western border of Yellowstone National Park. The terrain here are high mountains interrupted by grassy meadows with elevations between 6,500 and 8,000 feet high. The tall forests here are a combination of pine, fir, and spruce trees, mingled with stands of quaking aspen. Wild berries like serviceberry, thimbleberry, huckleberry, and golden currant fill in a dense undergrowth and provide shelter and food for animals and humans alike. The winters here are cold and snowy, with an average temperature of well below freezing, even during the daytime. Each month of winter averages about 3 inches of snowfall, which can add up to a foot or more near the end of the season. Given its proximity to Yellowstone National Park, you can expect to see moose, mule deer, elk, and pronghorn antelope browsing the meadow edges. The predators of this area include cougars, wolves, coyotes, black bears, and an increasing and spreading population of grizzly bears. Fall is a busy time for people in this area. Locals and visitors pack the mountains in search of game, beginning in late August with archery hunters, then rifle hunters at the beginning of October. Recreation is a key economic driver for communities here, as hunting, fishing, snowmobiling, and hiking draw visitors from around the world to this area. Fall is also a busy time for bears. Black bears and grizzlies are in hyperphagia, which is a metabolic state that increases their drive to find food. Bears will cover miles and miles each day looking for extra calories that will build their fat reserves needed for hibernation and may cause them to deviate from predictable patterns to do so. Just northwest of Henry's Lake is a small cluster of mountains called the Henry's Lake or Lion's Head Mountains, which are part of the Caribou-Targhee National Forest. There are many roads between this area and the national park, which conservationists say limit wildlife travel between ecosystems, but apparently grizzlies didn't get the memo. On the evening of September 30th, 2023, 2 elk hunters were sneaking through the timber in search of the elusive and secretive ungulates. For the sake of this episode, we'll refer to them as Mike and Steve, as their actual identities have not been released to the public. Mike and Steve have formulated a plan to stalk a stand of dark timber and determine the route each of them would plan to travel. They would make sure to be near each other, but far enough apart that elk would find it more difficult to circle around them in the timber. Elk that detect a human scent on the breeze will frequently tiptoe around them while using the breeze to their advantage, and can do this making very little detectable noise. I've had this happen to me many times while stalking elk in central Idaho. As Steve and Mike split up, they carried their hunting equipment as well as a sidearm, but did not pack bear spray. Mike headed along his planned route, and Steve was a little further around the hill and traveling a route that roughly paralleled Mike's. The plan was to meet up at the end of the stalk, or back at camp, to discuss the information gathered during the stalk, if neither man was successful at getting a shot or harvesting an elk. As Steve sneaked through the shadows of the dark timber, he scanned each bush and tree for telltale signs of elk. An outline of an ear, or the white fur on their rump, are sometimes all the evidence the animals will provide, as they secret themselves among the bushes. Knowing the habits of game animals is the key to successfully harvesting them. The hunters knew that in the evening the elk would be headed downhill to a water source to fill up after sleeping the day away in shaded beds higher on the mountains. While searching for sign of elk in the area, Steve examined the trails for tracks and wallows for recent proof of their activity. He decided to continue on his route to the dark timber on the north side of the slope and began working his way toward that location. The brush on the northern slope of most mountains and hills here is more dense than on southern exposures due to longer-lasting accumulations of precipitation. Steve pushed his way through tangles of brush and over deadfall logs while keeping his eyes scanning for scant detail. As Steve crept along, a rustling in the bushes a short distance away caught his attention. He was probably hoping a nice-sized bull elk would emerge and present a broadside shot. But what blurred from the cover was a large sow grizzly, and she wasn't happy to find a human being so close to her, so unexpectedly. Now, a little bit about grizzlies and their speed is in order to understand Steve's predicament. They can sprint at over 40 miles an hour, which translates into 44 feet per second. This distance is roughly equal to 15 yards, which means the sow emerging at only 100 feet would be upon Steve in about 2.5 seconds. That isn't much time to consider whether her charge is a bluff or a full-on attack. As soon as Steve's mind could process the bear's presence, he yelled out to Mike to make sure he knew the grizzly was close. That was all it took for the sow to initiate her attack on him. She began advancing toward him, as his hand was already reaching toward his pistol in its holster. The sources I could find regarding this incident did not indicate what caliber, make, or model of firearm Steve was carrying. I would only assume, by the outcome, that it had to be at least a .40 caliber, as a smaller firearm probably would have only injured the grizzly, increasing her aggression and not stopping her. Steve could see the grizzly stretching out her paws with each bound, bringing her dangerously close to him with each one. In a split second, he unholstered his pistol and let fly several shots, each striking the sow as she advanced toward him. By the time the gunshots stopped echoing down the valley, the sow had piled up only a few yards from Steve. He was shaken by the speed at which the sow closed the distance between them, but relieved that her progress was stopped by his focused and proficient use of his sidearm. Steve immediately knew that his elk hunt was over, at least for the time being. The hunters made their way back toward civilization to find a phone. They contacted the Idaho Citizens Against Poaching Group, which is an organization of Idaho citizens focused on preventing or apprehending wildlife poachers. CAP responders contacted the Idaho Fish and Game, who sent an investigative team to the attack site. They conducted a thorough investigation, utilizing the information provided by Steve as well as the forensic evidence, like bear and human tracks, shell casings, and entry wounds on the grizzly's carcass. They determined that the angle of the entry wounds verified Steve's portrayal of things, and decided that he had acted in self-defense. This is an interesting point, because they also indicated that the sow was acting in self-defense when reacting to the man's presence. During this incident, Mike and Steve were uninjured, and the sow grizzly was obviously killed. There was no source indicating that the sow was defending a cached food source, and didn't state that there were cubs present at the time. It appeared that the sow was simply reacting to a human being too close that apparently made her feel threatened. As a hunter, I go into the woods as prepared as I can for a confrontation with a hungry or aggressive predator. I think it is safe to assume that Mike and Steve did the same. If it weren't for Steve's quick reactions in defending himself, he may have been the victim of a bear attack. He may have sustained serious injuries or death at the paws, claws, and teeth of one of the world's most powerful predators. Authorities issued a statement encouraging hunters to carry bear spray, hunt in groups, watch for bear sign like tracks, scat, and digging. Hunters should remove their meat as fast as possible and hang it, as well as trash and food, at least 200 yards from their camp and at least 10 feet off the ground. They also advise that hunters make noise around creeks and streams, as the babbling of the water can drown out their approach. It seems like Steve and Mike followed these guidelines for the most part, which may have prevented a more serious and injurious attack. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I have a few questions for you. Do you think bear spray would have been effective to avoid this attack, or did it happen too fast? Do you think Steve should have waited to see if the grizzly sow was bluffing before firing his pistol? Why do you think Steve and the grizzly ended up surprising each other? Was she napping when he approached? What would you have done if you found yourself in Steve's position and were being charged by an enormous grizzly from close range? I'll be glad to read and respond to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to Aspen Snowmass Ski Resort in Aspen, Colorado. This is the heart of the Rocky Mountains, and they are at their most majestic in this area. The granite peaks jet over 14,000 feet in elevation and push back the starry host on crisp fall nights. The tall forests of pine, fir, and spruce accommodate large patches of quaking aspen trees, which turn gold in autumn's jubilee. This patchwork of color and slope is the medium of Mother Nature at her most artistic. The elk, deer, and moose mosey through greenery and trim any plants like furry gardeners equipped with primitive tools. The predators here include stealthy cougars, comical coyotes, bodacious bobcats, and bedeviled black bear boars. On the evening of October 23, 2023, a security guard, whom we will refer to as Jack, was performing his perfunctory duties. On any given night, Jack may be called to confront loud hotel guests or escort unauthorized visitors from the St. Regis Aspen Resort. This job had its exciting moments, but for the most part was relatively easy. The luxury hotel had recently been closed for renovations and historically is a hub for the rich and famous frequenting the town of Aspen. It's positioned right at the base of the ski resort and draws visitors with finer tastes, with its kitchen serving delicious fare. Aspen is an interesting town nestled among the high ridge of Rocky Mountains about 100 miles west of Denver. Although the big city sprawls and bustles with towering buildings and honking horns, Aspen is quite the opposite. The mountains around the town rise inside the city limits and surround it like a crumpled emerald blanket. Unlike other blankets, this one may not bring warmth, safety, and rest, but unexpected visitors who do surprising and harmful things. On this evening, Jack was in the process of marking off his list of procedures that he performed each night. The quiet hotel was eerie and offered him the expectation of a boring and slow shift. Just after 11 p.m., Jack received a call over his radio regarding something very unusual. The static-filled voice over the radio mentioned something about a black bear being seen near the kitchen area of the restaurant. He probably thought the bear had just been seen peeking into a door and had left on its own. I imagine he thought it was a curious cub or a juvenile and could easily be driven off by a little yelling and clapping of his hands. Jack wasn't equipped with a firearm as a security officer, as his first response to a crisis would have been to call the police after investigating it himself. He wasn't equipped with bear spray, as he was working in a hotel and not a mountain meadow. As Jack warily walked toward the kitchen, he gripped the only self-defense tool he had access to, his radio. Now, if you know anything about bear attacks, the most important information is what the victim doesn't know. Jack wasn't aware that a rather large black bear, estimated to be at least 350 pounds, had been drawn to the courtyard of the hotel. The scent of food and garbage was released into the evening air by doors propped open during renovations, doors that would have normally been closed. Jack was unaware that this hungry black bear had found a way into the kitchen and had already begun wandering the hallways in search of food. Jack left the security room as soon as the bear's presence was reported. He carefully watched well ahead of him to see if he could locate the bear as he approached the kitchen. Taking the corners widely allowed him to see further down the hallways and into rooms as he examined the floor for muddy paw prints. Now this bear attack was caught on video by the hotel's closed-circuit cameras. I've posted a link to this video on my Patreon account, which is linked below. If you'd like to check it out, it's pretty interesting and actually shows what is described below. Given it is the video of the attack, it wouldn't pass YouTube guidelines, so it wasn't included as part of this video. As Jack approached a hallway, he could see the footprints of a bear on the tile floor. The prints clearly went one way down the hall, then came back along the same path. The problem was figuring out if the bear was coming or going, and just where it had ended up. Jack proceeded from a prep room into a dishwashing room and glanced around. He didn't see the bear, and probably hoped he wouldn't see it. His eyes strained to search the shadows for a dark shape, but nothing materialized. Jack walked down a small hallway to enter another room, and just as he rounded a corner, he ran face to face with a short but very stout black bear. The light from the room behind Jack illuminated the face of the bear as it dashed toward him. As the bear quickly stood to its hind legs, Jack could see a beautiful hourglass-shaped patch of white fur in the middle of its chest. His mind processed mere fractions of a second like minutes. as he watched the right paw of the bruiser reach out toward him. Jack spun away to his left and back toward the door he came through. His mind may have been working faster than time passing, but his body was still bound by the laws of physics, matter, and energy, and there was simply no way he could escape the amount of energy the matter of the bear's paws was reaching out to impart upon him. As Jack spun to flee, the bear's massive right paw was heading toward him at a much faster and more powerful pace. The paw may have been intended for Jack's head, but where it struck him was along the right side of his back. In a blindingly quick swat, the black bear imparted enough force on Jack to send him flying over 10 feet across the kitchen floor, while completely tattering his suit jacket, shirt, and undershirt. The bear's claws cut through the flesh of Jack's back, leaving 5 distinct gashes, as well as a bear paw-shaped bruise. As Jack slid on his stomach across the kitchen floor, he clearly expected to receive follow-up bites, swats, and claw gashes. He lay prone and still for a split second, waiting to determine where he needed to defend from the bear's attack. In the CCTV footage, you can see the confusion and expectation of the bear on Jack's expression. The bear stood up on its hind legs while staring toward the human who had so suddenly materialized in front of him as he rounded the kitchen corner. Then the bear glanced back into the dark room behind it and disappeared into the safety of cover and distance. Once Jack realized the bear was not going to pounce on him to continue its attack, he pushed himself back to his feet and sprinted away from the kitchen area and that black bear that had so suddenly materialized in front of him as he rounded the kitchen corner. Jack immediately pressed the button on his radio and confirmed that there was definitely a large black bear in the kitchen area. The adrenaline of the blitzkrieg bear attack had dulled the pain from the gashes of the bear's claws. It was now starting to wear off a bit, and Jack knew he would need medical attention to help stave off infection. He used his cell phone to reach out for an ambulance to take him to medical help. I could find no summary of the medical assistance or number of sutures or stitches required to close Jack's wounds. The information indicated that Jack was released the next day after an overnight stay for observation in the hospital. Typical medical treatment after a bear attack is a heavy dose of antibiotics to fend off the infections, as well as stitches to close the layers of flesh penetrated by the bear's teeth and claws. The Colorado Parks and Wildlife Agency responded to the reports of Jack's run-in with the black bear just after it had occurred around 11 p.m. Monday night. They sent out a response team to the location, and while en route, the team observed 8 black bears walking the streets of Aspen, headed toward downtown. The response team arrived at the hotel just after midnight and immediately began scouring the area in search of the bear. They had a fairly unique description of the bear based on the hourglass-shaped patch of white fur on its chest. Its short but robust build also allowed the officers to eliminate other visiting black bears from their list of potential hotel kitchen invaders. Once they located the bear that fit the description, they were equipped and ready to tranquilize the bear. The problem with doing so in this location and time was that they were undermanned. They were concerned that they may lose the bear in the darkness and not be able to remove it. They decided to wait and return the next day to try again. On Tuesday evening, the officers returned to where they last saw the bear. This time, the game officers recruited the assistance of the Aspen Police Department, as well as the Pitkin County Sheriff's Office. The search party found the bear in Connor Park, near East Hopkins Avenue. After giving the bear the once-over to make sure he fit the description, they hazed the bear into a tree. A professionally aimed dart filled with tranquilizer put the bear to sleep, and it was recovered from the tree via a ladder on an Aspen fire truck just after 2 a.m. on Wednesday morning, October 25, 2023. Colorado Parks and Wildlife determined the bear to be a nuisance bear. Typically, bears in the area are allowed 2 strikes before being euthanized, but this bear's boldness and lack of fear of human beings in their dwellings was enough for them to decide to euthanize it. The large black bear was humanely put to sleep by CPW officers, and its carcass was taken for analysis. Following this incident, CPW issued a public warning encouraging residents to be bear aware. This statement is glaringly ironic given the incident occurred within a hotel kitchen, not a mountain trail. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I have a few questions for you. Given there were 8 black bears observed by officials the same night they were responding to a bear attack inside a hotel, what do you think needs to happen to make Aspen streets safer from bear attacks? How do you think this bear attack could have been avoided? In what ways could it have been worse? Can you describe a face-to-face encounter with a hungry black bear at your job? I will be glad to read and respond to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider clicking on the like button and clicking on the bell icon. We'll help you know when we post our new episodes. Posting our video links to your social media profiles furthers awareness, and it's fun. We slashed our prices in our merch store, linked below, so check out the bargains there while you shop. As a member of our human community, remember to adventure bravely and be careful out there, especially in bear country.